Okay, welcome back to another episode of Casey Campbell's Videocast. Of course, I'm Casey Campbell of Great Lakes Post. Joining me right now is none other than Graham Couch from the Lansing State Journal. And of course, if you haven't heard, the Big Ten is back. Football is back. It will start October 23rd and 24th. Season likely schedule likely gonna come out next week. And of course, season starts on October 23rd. Hi, Graham.
How are you, Casey? Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for coming on and doing this. So yeah, your initial thoughts of the Big Ten being back?
Yeah, well, I mean, it seemed to be leaning this way the last few days and such. I'm a little conflicted. I'm excited for football, just the idea of Big Ten football. I miss it on Saturdays. I enjoy it. It's why one of the main reasons I do what I do for a living. But there's also a part of me that thinks about the priorities we have right now with what's going on and question whether, and I think certainly college football is our most important sport in this country. I think it impacts more people than any other sport in terms of livelihoods and other athletes just because of the financial model. And so I think there are a lot of reasons to play if you can do it safely, and the rapid testing seems to make it seem like they can do it safely. But I also have thoughts about, should we have rapid testing for children K through 12 or teachers before we're worried about Big Ten athletes? And is this where our heads should be? And so that is what it is. I'm certainly, I don't begrudge people wanting to play and playing. And I think if it's safe to do so, they probably should give it a try. I think this has been done pretty cautiously with pretty decent protocols. I love the addition of the positivity rates that puts it partly on the communities they're in. So if your community is over, your county is over like 7.5%, you're not going to play. And so that puts it on, you need to be in a safer area. If your team's over 5%, you're not going to play. So I think, and there are some other things. So I think they're doing this as safely as you can. I don't have an issue with it. I'm excited about seeing Big Ten football. I think it's better getting it in before Christmas in a window that sort of more is football season, more natural to us. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things I'm excited about. And I'm still curious about like covering football, what that's going to look like for people like myself. It's going to be a weird year, but it's already been a weird year. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting experience for sure. I know that. I know you brought up the concerns, and of course, this week high school football begins in this state. Of course, your area has seen a lot of teams, many teams that initially said we're not going to play. Then, when the MHSA announced a few weeks ago that we are, Hazlitt, Holt, Okemos, East Lansing all announced that they would be back. The Lansing schools, however, are not coming back. Have said that they will kind of stay shut down. How excited are you about that and the concerns with that? Because I know you've talked about them.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, I went to the Lansing School District. I came back to work in kind of a bucket list gig, the hometown paper, so to speak. So I don't like Lansing schools being alone on this myself. But I also don't have a problem with people trying to play right now. I think outside of Ingham County, which recently is spiking. Like, I don't know if East Lansing and Okemos and Williamston by Friday will be able to play this week because of what's happening with MSU students and the county numbers. I don't know where that'll lead people. But until this recent outbreak, the positivity rates were like 2%, in Eaton and Ingham and Clinton County around this area. So it certainly, those are areas that you ought to be able to try to do things again. You ought to be able to consider returning to school if you can do it safely or play sports. And I'm also somebody who knows the value of athletics for a kid. I mean, I got a heck of a lot more out of not just high school sports, but playing on the street with a group of fairly large group of kids that lived on my block growing up in terms of leadership skills and in terms of than I did out of anything in high school science or math. Now, that I'm telling you right now, I was not a great high school science or math student. And so, like, I'm not a good example, and I'm not poo-pooing those. Those are very important things. I'm just saying so are high school athletics, and so are the ability to compete and play and interact. And so, I'm glad a lot of kids are getting that opportunity. I wish the Lansing schools were. I'm conflicted there on their decision. I'm careful not to criticize people who are doing things carefully for what they think is right for children. But I think if I was running it, I might be inclined to try to play.
Yeah, of course. I'll get into Michigan State in a minute, but the interesting question of you talked also about the masks and face coverings of all that. It likely, from what I've been talking to many coaches, many athletes, it's really not the players. We haven't really they haven't really kind of they like what, as long as we get to play, we'll do whatever we want. It's really kind of like the parents that are kind of saying, okay, maybe this isn't safe. So you kind of like, how long do you think that maybe kids will have to wear face coverings while they're playing, and how do you think that'll work among teams as we start football starting tomorrow?
Yeah, and so in football and soccer, I have some questions about whether it's necessary. You're outdoors, your length of time you're in contact with people is usually less continuous. Volleyball is indoors. Football is piles of people, right? I mean, it is and here's the bottom line: wherever you stand on it, there are two options with those sports. You either wear the mask and accept it and can do it and safely, or you're not going to play. I do not think the governor is going to budge on that. And I've talked to school board members of districts that would think differently if the mask requirement wasn't there in terms of allowing students to come back. So the mask requirement, I don't think, is going anywhere. How well it's enforced, I think, will vary by area. And that's supposed to be up to, certainly it's not up to the referees or anything. It's supposed to be up to the putting on the event. And so if it's not done well and how much, county health officials, how much they weigh in on that, how well it's enforced, I don't know. But I think, and I certainly, what's interesting is I talked to some people, 4 stories on this, and the Ingham County Health Officer, as well as the leading doctor at Sparrow Health System. And both of them said there's no difference in oxygen, like you can play. And now, but if you talk to people who run and exerted themselves, especially runners, they'll tell you with the wrong mask, it's really hard. It's a problem. So I think the type of equipment you have, which I worry about things being cost prohibitive for kids too, but look, shoes, footwear is important. And this is going to be one of the types of things you have to have the right stuff to do it right. And I think we have to find a way to help kids get the things they need. And it's not perfect. You're taking a risk if you're because we don't have testing in high schools yet. We don't. I mean, that's the other difference. There's playing and assuming the kids across the way. Like, I think if I was a high school administrator, I would not let my students play against schools that were in person. That might be something I said. Because to me, like, if I were running a school right now, a lot of these places, I would let kids have activities and not the in-person school, because it's an easier thing to trace, right? If you're part of one club, the yearbook or whatever it is, and the football team, and you come down with something, I've got a smaller group of people to figure out what's happening. Whereas if you do the whole school, it winds up being a mess. So I think I'm curious to see where it all lands. I'm really rooting for high school football. I want I want kids to be healthy and happy and have some normalcy. It's been a long haul for them. And, so we'll see. We could all be shut down in 2 weeks with all this, or it could be going swimmingly. And I think it's important to look to it like a place like Indiana. And one of the mistakes the MHSA sometimes makes is they'll talk about neighboring areas. In Illinois, the governor's really held firm in not playing. Ohio's probably a better example. Indiana should never be an example for anything. I mean, they're playing through high positivity rates, through quarantines, through everything. I mean, it's just lots of games missed. I mean, Michigan does not have the same stomach for this as Indiana. And if we wind up in a situation where things are looking like they do in Indiana, it'll be shut down.
Yeah. Well, let's transition from high school to college. Of course, Michigan State, another with football and stuff. And you talked about the positivity rates around Ingham County, Eaton County, Clinton County, around that area. How concerned are you about that? And maybe if the Spartans are going to have to miss some games coming up in late October?
Yeah, I mean, there's some time before then, right? And so these kids are on quarantine. And so I mean, by the outbreaks now should be, I think, taken care of then, and they're going to be strictly enforced. So I do think there's a really good chance by then it looks different, it looks better. You're getting a little more in the cold and flu season. I don't know what that's going to mean for everything. Um, but yeah, I mean, the one thing I like about it though is it gives people more accountability, right? I mean, it's hard to get 21-year-olds to look. We're all there. I'm not old man yells at cloud here. I mean, that's what I mean. I've seen this more. We were all when we were 21. I don't know how I would be behaving. There are certain things I'd like to think I would be doing better than some people. But one of the things that when you put accountability on people, and the idea that if we don't do this well and take this seriously, you're going to cost yourself Big Ten football. I like that. But I also think that we're likely to have it under control by then, at least this current outbreak. And I can't imagine that it's allowed to sustain itself for very much longer without serious repercussions for those offending it.
Right. You know, with this shortened season, I know that the kids have, that the team has remained, on campus, having individual workouts and stuff. Now it looks like team practices, I think, have resumed. How do you think that this is going to work? Because in case everybody forgot, Mel Tucker's the new head coach and not Mark D'Antonio. How do you think this is going to work out for them? Hey, I know we have a month and there's still a lot of figuring out to do, but initially, where do you think this goes for them?
So I think there are two ways to look at this. One, and I know this from people I've talked to, that they would not have been heartbroken at Michigan State within the program if they'd had more time, or even if not played till the spring, or even next year. I think because they didn't get a proper run up here. They were not one of the programs that are looking like they're going to wind up in a college football playoff. This isn't Ryan Day saying, I want to have this in by December. This is a development year. It's a year of transition. And they didn't really get a proper run up. And so they would not have minded that. In a lot of ways, that makes it tough. However, there are other arguments that this is a great first year because, number one, you're not going to have difficult opposing crowds. There's going to be no fans in stadiums other than family members. It's going to be a short season. So you're not going to wear down in weeks 10, 11, and 12. Now, you do only have conference games, which is tough and unrelenting, and that's not as good for a program that maybe could get some confidence wins. But BYU looks really good. Miami, Florida looks good enough. I think Toledo was going to be decent. Like, their non-conference opponents were going to be no picnic either way if they had played that schedule. And the other thing is the Big Ten, and I don't know how many of these kids will opt back in, but a lot of kids have opted out and probably won't play. So a lot of the biggest stars in the league elsewhere aren't going to play. And Michigan State doesn't really have any of those kids who are surefire NFL draft picks. They have a few kids who've opted out. We'll see which ones decide to opt back in. So you could argue in one sense that this is a really good way to do a first year. It's shorter. There's no opposing fans. There's not going to be their traditional. There may be bowls, but I don't think it's going to feel like a bowl season where if you're left out, So I think there's a lot of things about it that make it okay if you're starting and really I think what you want if you're Michigan State is you want to see nobody's expecting magic, right? You want to see some promise, flashes of something different. It looked a little different than it did at the end under Mark D'Antonio, and some hope that boy they could be on the right track. That looks promising. This looks good. Looks like they found a quarterback or this sort of thing, and so that going into what is hopefully a more normal 2021 fall, that they're able to have some real optimism.
Yeah. I also heard that basketball could possibly be, somewhat announced today. Where are we on that? Have you heard anything regarding that?
I've been checking. It's one of those things where it was funny. I had a previously scheduled interview on a piece I'm working on that I didn't want to cancel because somebody was difficult to get a hold of, and I just wanted to do it. And it was like at 10:15 this morning as everything was happening. So I got the quick takes, I did up, and other things were happening, and I'm trying to do this interview and pay attention to 4 or 5 things. And so that's every day, all day you look down and you miss something. I don't know 100% what's going on with hoops yet, but I do think they are going to try to come back in late November from everything I've heard and read. And you're going to see some early tournaments that may be in that Orlando bubble where the NBA is now, including the Champions Classic where Michigan State is in, and maybe the Orlando tournament they were going to be in already. So, I mean, that could be those things could be simultaneous. Their year could be less disrupted because remember, it is very modern times that we've started college basketball season in early November. When I was growing up, it wasn't December 1st all the time, but it was sort of a post-Thanksgiving around there, Coca-Cola Classic sort of thing you'd have. And the idea of, so I don't think the basketball season will feel that disrupted how it looks. Because what I don't have yet is any idea of, what the Big Ten season looks like. How are they? And I think the one thing that hoops has an advantage of is football goes first. How does rapid testing look? Does that allow you not to need a bubble for college basketball players, because this really does work, and you can test guys on game day, or you can do things where you do, I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, but you could have 4 teams arrive in Bloomington, Indiana for the weekend, Thursday, Saturday type deal, Friday, Sunday, and play 2 games, and 2 games in one spot. That's a little bit more. I don't know how they'll do it. I'm curious in whether there'll be any fans for any of it, because I don't think we know yet vaccine wise, and I don't think that'll be distributed in time. We just don't have an idea what the climate's going to look like weeks and months from now. We're all basing our information on what we know today, and what we know today is they feel comfortable playing football. They feel comfortable trying to start basketball. And yet you can have something like what's just happened in our county here in Ingham County, where the cases spike enormously, very quickly, and everything is reconsidered, and that could easily happen to anybody.
Yeah, Bill Beekman is set to address the media later on in like about almost a little under an hour.
Right.
What do you possibly want to hear from him?
Yeah, well, it was very clear the first time that ADs were left in the dark, and that was a little puzzling. I remember Bill Beekman spoke after the original decision, and to not play, and I remember being part of that Zoom conversation and realizing that there really, there was some stuff I got from him about non-revs and other things and the finances, but the ADs were really not in the thick of things. So I'm curious about the process. I'm curious about MSU's other sports. I'm curious about the finances, the process, what's going on in the athletic department, sort of the planning there. I think it becomes much more localized with him in terms of my interest.
All right. Graham Couch, thank you so much for coming on, and I'm sure we're going to be talking to you later on about anything else Michigan State related.
No, I enjoyed the conversation, Casey. Thanks a lot.